Before we start this week's video, I'd like to thank everyone for watching these videos so far, and please don't forget to comment, like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We're very close to reaching 1,000 subscribers here on this channel, and it is our goal to reach that by the end of the year. Can we do that? Yes, we can. Thank you again for watching, and enjoy the video. Welcome to Film Fu, where the cuts are as clear as the kicks. I'm Shifu Payne, and division. It's something we come across a lot in our lives.
When you're a kid, there's clear division between student and teacher. If you're in clubs, you divide off from each other to pursue an interest, or you divide 2 from 2 to make 3.
Wait, that's not right.
Now obviously, these things are all minute and come with the territory, but where things go dark is when people divide from each other socially. For as long as there's been a class system, there have been those in the high classes looking down upon the poorer classes. If people have been raised on wealth, there's the obvious lack of context as to why people don't have certain necessities they otherwise take for granted.
Capitalism sucks. Moving on.
But when it comes to land, you see a great amount of mudslinging and overall discord for no real reason. Okay, there's an us and them mentality, but if you're all people trying to live day to day on your respective patch of dirt, why belittle others just because their patch of dirt is not your patch of dirt? And this really makes no sense when it's people that live on the same patch of dirt.
Close to home, in this past decade and a year of 2020, there has been a renewal in the division between the north and south of England. Over, let's see. COVID-19 restrictions, tea that's too milky, something bagpipes. So let's take a look at a film which prioritizes this division and does that while juggling swords. Martial Arts of Shaolin.
Released in 1986, Martial Arts of Shaolin stars Jet Li, Jian Hu, and Quan Huan. Directed by Chia Yang Yu and written by Yang Ping Shi. This film was released 4 years after the Shaolin Temple, the film that is most often considered to have caused resurgence in the Shaolin Temple in the public sphere, which when you consider that kind of puts into perspective what the focus was behind the scenes for this film. The opening credits highlight the temple and the practices of respective monks. I'm willing to bet these were actual monks there at the time as well. This was all most likely to stir up interest in the temple after it had been reopened and became more of a tourist hotspot. The primary lead on this film, Jet Li, was also the lead for the Shaolin Temple. Also probably a move to generate more clout by having fans of the 1982 film carry over to this one to drum up more money for the temple itself in tourism, which would obviously make more capital for the Chinese government.
But before we take this commentary too much further, let's take a look at the plot, shall we?
A young monk from the Henan Shaolin Temple, played by Li, catches word of the arrival of a magistrate who he has a personal vendetta against for killing his parents. When he attempts to assassinate the magistrate, he runs into 2 other monks, played by Hu and Huan, from a southern temple, who also seek justice against the magistrate. The 3 of them therefore work together to bring down the tyrant, while also trying to not get caught by not only the magistrate, but also by their respective masters.
With that synopsis in mind, you can kind of see where the North v South commentary kind of comes in.
There's an early rivalry between Li and Hu that culminates in the settling of differences, as well as Li helping to pair Hu and Huang up together.
Because that's what heroes do.
But what are the differences between the North and South of China on a social level, economic level, geological level? Let's take a look.
Let's start off with the terrain, as it is probably the easiest difference to identify. In the north, it's historically far colder and with more plainland, grassland, and even desert. No, deserts, not deserts. This colder climate and plainlands are not ideal for the growth of rice, which requires warmer weather to grow, which is why most of rice's production in China is in the southern region, where it's grown in paddy fields, which are fields that are flooded with water, which is good as the southern region gets more rain and has more marshland, as well as mountainous regions. This difference has actually led to a different cuisine overall. In the south, rice is the primary food source, with maybe some other fruits thrown in, while the northern half has a wider variety of foods using noodles, dumplings, and stronger flavors, which has all over time created a physical difference between the two. Those from the north tend to be taller with more strong and agile bodies, while the native to southern China tends to have a shorter height. More stereotypes and division arose during the Qing dynasty, as identification and the geological differences became more focused on. You wouldn't actually think it, given that the economy for the north was greater for a long time, and the emperor was primarily located in the north, but the stereotype tends to be the northerners are more brutish or straightforward, tending to be simple but direct, while Southerners are more scholarly and traditional, more inclined towards intellectual pursuits, but also more likely to be selfish and manipulate for their own means. The differences in terrain have certainly made warfare very different historically. You can kind of imagine how much more difficult getting soldiers and heavy equipment is in wetter, more mountainous climates compared to flat plains.
But without diving too much further, let's take a look at the fight scenes in this film and see how these differences factor into the overall piece.
This fight scene takes place about at the end of the first act and the early stage of the second act, when our three protagonists converge and a fight breaks out between Lee and Hu over a confusion of loyalty. Hu throws a punch while Lee parries, another couple of blows are parried, as well as a sweep from Hu, which is when this is said.
You southern barbarians, you're all the same!
It goes back to that stereotyping both halves think less of each other, considering them as less cultured for different reasons. The straightforward nature of the North and the traditions of the South with a stereotype for scheming.
Some more dodges and parries as the fight continues, as well as some interesting movements from Hu. As you can see, his footwork is very strong, and looking at his hand positioning, those are very specific. I want to pair this with the 5 animal styles, but this hand position here is leading me more in the direction of Hung Gar. It has that same sort of grounded nature to it, using strong stances such as horse stance as well as strong attacks. Hung Gar also originated in the southern Shaolin Temple in the Fujian province during the 17th century after the destruction of the Henan Temple by the Qing dynasty, so the geological context carries through. Things remain consistent with the strong dynamic strikes from Hu as well as the legwork which follows. Hu really seems like the obvious dominator here as the pressure continues, but the strong strikes in offense is something not uncommon to Northern Shaolin. Northern Shaolin also uses a great deal of kicks and acrobatic movement, with more of a general emphasis on offense rather than defense, which Lee really displays here. A lovely combination of slashes are shown, as well as a jumping hook kick and a subsequent high kick.
This fight scene so far really highlights the individual strengths and shortcomings of each individual style. While the Northern style is very offensive, it kind of lacks in those sort of defensive techniques. So we see a lot more of dodging, while Hung Gar is very rooted and very dynamic, but it doesn't really have a lot of kicking techniques adding to its roster of offense.
After the sweep from Lee and the block from Hu leading into a throw, there's a small character bit of each of them silently acknowledging each other's ability. These guys are supposed to become allies, so I like having this break in the action here.
Now, back to hitting each other.
Things continue with Lee throwing a roundhouse that Hu blocks. A back and forth is had with Lee throwing more kicks while Hu dodges and blocks, as well as throwing a couple of hammer strikes. Hu catches Lee's leg and throws him again, still highlighting the shortcomings as there aren't too many throws in Northern Shaolin. A kick throws Hu off guard. Lee then grabs Hu by the wrist and by the looks of it tries to throw or grapple Hu but fails. He hyperextends the arm, pauses, expecting something to happen I think, and then goes in for an elbow. It's consistent with Northern Shaolin because again there's not a lot of training for grapples in Northern Shaolin. A couple more attempts which transfer less to throws and more to pinning each other, as let's be honest, pinning someone is probably easier than throwing them. This all culminates when Huan tells them to stop as the fight ends in a draw.
Ending the fight in a draw does sound kind of anticlimactic until you consider that they're supposed to be allies at the end of the day and balance each other with their respective characteristics. So showing them to be evenly skilled puts them on more even ground.
The film culminates in a fight on an Imperial ship, not only with our three protagonists, but also with the warriors from each temple coming together to support.
Which brings together the message of the film, that the differences between the two halves are not important, and what does matter is coming together and uniting in the face of injustice. But there's kind of a wrinkle in that message, and it's who's saying it and why they're saying it.
Distribution of this film was not in the hands of Hong Kong. It was instead in the hands of China and by extension the Chinese government. There are location shoots not only at the Shaolin Temple but also at the Forbidden City, a cornerstone landmark for Beijing. Even if Hong Kong were the producers, they would have to have involvement from the Chinese government for these location shoots. We've already stated how the pushing of the temple to begin with would positively affect tourism. But what does this message do? It drives the message of unity and coming together to pursue justice. How does a person do that? By supporting the government. Unify behind the sitting government for justice and equality. Let's weed out those bad, nasty politicians that don't care about you. Have a stronger government. North, South, doesn't matter. Your government will serve you fairly so long as you serve them fairly.
Having this sort of undercurrent with this sort of message kind of puts a bad taste in the mouth. Because this is a good message, but it places a bias on it, teetering more towards a political mandate, rather than just general injustice. And think about the implications for this. Having this sort of message begins to put the government itself as exempt from this sort of scrutiny, placing them above the ethics and scrutiny of the people. What holds them accountable? They just become a higher authority, preaching unity for their own gain. But with all that being said, what is our main takeaway from this film, but within not just martial arts, but in general?
First of all, the martial arts practiced by people do not matter. One is not better than the other. Sure, there are similarities and differences that would lead to a bending upon pressuring them against their respective counter. But at the end of the day, it's not about the martial art, it's about the person.
Finally, maybe I'm just saying this out of political tension, or maybe I'm just more sensitive to this sort of thing at the moment. It's always important to be wary of agendas. Apply real, critical thought to the intentions and what someone says. Even conduct research into who's saying it, because you don't know if they're actually saying what they're saying for altruistic reasons, or if it's just for their own gain.
A political candidate can preach unity and success for a country but just want fame, power and intrigue. A teacher can offer independence and security but just be peddling dribble for money. And a whole entire country can push an uplifting and unifying message for the sake of silent, obedient consent.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
Thank you all for watching this week's video, and until next time everyone, peace be with you.